Susie,
Rob,
I am really excited for this little bonus episode because this is a rare occasion where you're going to tell me about something that you've been working on with this new crazy spiky dinosaur, right?
I am apparently. It's been an exciting week.
Yeah. So I want to hear all about your spiky dinosaur. I'm ready. People are primed.
Okay, but first of all, I've got a joke for you.
Okay.
What kind of dinosaur has a spike in his butt?
Uh, Not Spicomellus, I'm presuming. I don't know. What kind of dinosaur has a spike in his butt?
Brontosaurus.
Right. Okay. So I have failed to take into account that it might be completely anatomically inaccurate and actually just based on a bad pun. Okay, thank you. So, Fossil fans, I want you to know that I had to almost beg Susie to let us do this as an episode, which I found truly bizarre because we want to talk about the dinosaur that Susie has had out in nature. This crazy
Woohoo!
new, woohoo! Was it last week, the week before?
It was Wednesday, so
Wednesday.
it was a week, just less than a week ago. Yeah.
This is hot, fresh stuff. So this thing is called Spicomellus. Now, you've actually described Spicomellus or named Spicomellus a few years ago, right?
Yeah, we named it in 2021, based on a single partial rib. Now, we don't dinosaur researchers known for, doing all sorts of slightly wacky things with taxonomy, but we don't normally name things based on such fragmentary fossils. But in this case, it was very, very clear that this was something completely different than anything we'd ever had. And
Hmm.
so obviously when what we're looking for when we're naming new taxa, we're trying to find features that differentiate the specimen that we have from all other things that we know, that's closely related. And in the case of Spicomellus, on this single partial rib, we had actually spikes, which, like armour, which in armored dinosaurs are usually just embedded in the skin. They're just osteoderm, so they're just basically bone floating in the skin. In Spicomellus, this rib, it actually had its spikes fused to the top surface of the rib. And we don't see that in any animal ever that's ever lived, extinct or living. So in terms of autapomorphies, the unique features that we need to define a new species, I thought that was a pretty strong one. Like, it was
I
pretty
would
good.
say so. I was just laughing to myself there because I was agreeing with, I never occurred to me that erecting a new taxon on the basis of one rib is insane. However, this rib is so weird. Imagine your rib cage had spikes coming out of it. It
Well,
was
sticking
absolutely,
through your skin, right?
yeah,
Sticking
yeah,
sticking
yeah.
through your skin and out to the outside world. Like, where do all your muscles go?
It's absolutely bonkers. But in addition to that, I also was laughing to myself about you using autopomorphic as a slur. Next time someone's being really annoying and weird, I could say, "Oh, that guy, he's a bit autopomorphic." He's
That's
he's
amazing.
yeah, he's a weirdo. He's autopomorphic. Okay,
Um,
so
but anyway, I mean, the other thing about this very, very fragmentary specimen was we were able to cut it up, and it had a bone tissue in it that we only see in ankylosaurs. So we were really
yeah.
sure it was an ankylosaur, right? Reviewer two, however, we submitted it to Nature at the time, and reviewer two was not convinced. So I was really, really, really happy with this new work, where we were
Mhm.
able to basically go back to the same reviewer two and go, aha, see, we were right. It was an ankylosaur all along.
So I'm really interested about the journey from this. So you had this single rib, you published that paper. So you erected this holotype back in 2023, was it?
2021.
2021. And then what happened after that? How did this new material come to light?
Well, we actually, when back when we were working on Spicomellus, we had already been working at this site in Morocco, with some collaborators from Moroccan University, and this collaboration had come about because we actually, back in about 2017, the Natural History Museum bought a stegosaur fossil, just a
Hmm.
forelimb and some vertebrae, from a fossil shop in Cambridge, which was purportedly from this site, this Middle Jurassic site in Morocco in the Middle Atlas Mountains. Now, Middle Jurassic stegosaurs are quite rare; they're very old, so we were a bit skeptical about this. So what we wanted to do really was to make sure that this stegosaur was from where they said it was from. And so I got in touch with a Moroccan colleague who works in Paris, who referred me to Driss Ouahash, who works in the University City Mohammed Ben Abdallah in Fez. And we started working together, And we went to the site in the Middle Atlas Mountains. Driss is an expert in the fossils of in the rocks of the area. He's a geologist,
Hmm.
so he's not a paleontologist. And in fact, there are no vertebrate paleontologists working in universities in Morocco. So there was no vertebrate paleontologist I could go to who had ever worked in this area. So I went to the
Hmm.
geologist who was an expert, and he came and we went and looked at the rocks together, and we determined that they were in fact Middle Jurassic, and this was the right age. So when we got the Spicomellus holotype, we knew it was from the same site, from the same location, and so we were very happy about its age because we'd actually been out there. Now Driss and I decided we were going to set up a formal collaboration to start exploring these rocks because they'd never been worked on by vertebrate paleontologists at all. But they're terrestrial rocks. They were deposited by rivers and on floodplains 165 million years ago, so they should be full of dinosaurs. And indeed, when we went and looked around them, they're absolutely stuffed full of bone. I mean, there's just bone everywhere at this site. It's
Hmm.
just incredible. And so we decided we were going to do, start exploring these rocks together. And then, of course, COVID struck. I actually had a grant to go on, like, we were leaving on the 28th of March 2020. And
Oh
I think,
man.
UK lockdown started on the 23rd or something, didn't it? Right?
March 2020, that's not the time to be going to
Anywhere. I mean,
different
it sucked.
continents. It's
No,
not a good time to be going to the shops. So let alone
no.
going to Morocco.
So we had to cancel that. And then, of course, I lost the funding and I didn't get the funding back again until
Oh,
2022. So in 2022, then went and I took friend of the fossil files, Rich Butler, with me.
oh right. Lovely.
And we went and met with Driss. And over the following 2 years, he had been exploring with his students during COVID, and they had found tons and tons and tons of fossils, some of which they picked up and some of which they'd left in the ground. But they'd found a number of sites that they then took us to, and we sort of all walked around these together. And he showed us what he had in the lab, and there was just this huge, rich amount of material coming out. And we went and chatted to a local farmer who Driss had made contact with, who was kind of pulling specimens out. And we basically asked him to. There's a lot of commercial fossil dealing in Morocco. It's
Mm.
black market fossil dealing. So you have to have an export permit. You have to have an excavation license and then an export permit. These guys, they don't have that. They buy off local subsistence farmers generally.
Hmm.
Everything's a bit cloak and dagger. Um,
Hmm.
and we asked the farmer basically to work for us instead of working for the commercial dealers. And so
Hmm.
what he then did over the subsequent year was he identified where the bone was coming out in this area next to his house. And if anything was at risk of being swept away in a flash flood. So the whole area is basically a badlands that's carved up by flash floods.
Hmm.
And there's these very deep channels, and the flash floods flash down them. And sometimes they just will deposit like 2 meters of sediment and just bury everything. And
Hmm.
sometimes they'll just destroy everything. So if anything was coming exposed, he was sort of yoiking it out and putting it in his shed or in the back of his house. And so when we then got there in May 2023 to do a big excavation, and we had a team of 6 from the UK and a team of 6 from Morocco, from the Moroccan group, or 5, I think. And we all met in Bourmain to see if we could sort of excavate, hopefully, what Mohammed the farmer had actually, found. And he started pulling out these things that he'd been rescuing from the bottom of this drainage channel. And it was just, I mean, straight away I was like, ka-ching, nature paper. It was immediate. We realized that we had a specimen of Spicomellus. We had 6 ribs. Actually, I think he had found 4, and we found another couple when we were excavating. But he had found with all the spikes on, and then just loads and loads and loads of just bonkers armor stuff that we just couldn't even identify. And then things that we
Wow.
could, like more like plates. And so we knew straight away that there was something really cool here. And he took us to where this stuff had been coming out. And we spent a week kind of working this 2 meters of sediment down to the bone layer and then excavating some more material ourselves. And then we obviously, so a real challenge with working in Morocco is that there's no natural history museums to put your fossils. So,
Mm.
and there's no labs to prepare them. So we then took them back to Driss's lab at the USMBA in Fez. And we basically filled his lab with rocks and fossils. And every now and again, he kept messaging me saying, "What are you going to do with all these fossils in my room?" And we for a long time I tried to get an export permit because we had an excavation permit, of course. So we
Hmm.
were all doing it legally. I tried to get an export permit to bring the specimen to the UK so that we could prepare it and study it in the UK and then send it back. But I just couldn't. It was just impossible to get the paperwork done. I don't know why. It was just really hard. And so in the end, in February this year, we decided that what actually we were going to have to do was just set up a lab in Morocco. And I think this is actually a much better solution anyway. So had a bit of funding, and I sent Kauta and Ahmed, who are our two PhD students in Morocco, Driss's two students, to a lab in Egypt, where they're great vertebrate paleontology. Uh, and they were able to train them. They gave them 2 weeks of training each in how to prepare fossils, and like everything from, opening field jackets to 3D scanning, and they did
Hmm.
absolutely everything. So they were really skilled up, which was great. And then they came back. And we took a bunch of equipment out and set up a lab. We also took Alison Park, who's a private preparator here in the UK, and she came with us because what I know about preparation can be summarized on the back of a postage stamp. I know a little bit more now, though.
Yeah.
And in a week, we basically spent a week in the lab in Morocco. We set up the lab. Kauta, Ahmed, Driss, and Khadija, Driss's wife, who's also a sedimentologist at the university. We prepared all of the fossils together. We described all of the fossils together, and then we were able to write the paper when we came back. So it's been like an amazing kind of process. But also it's been about kind of, training and capacity building and setting up a collection in Morocco, setting up a lab in Morocco, and we hope to put these specimens on display as well.
So, I mean, there's so much interesting parts to this story that I can't really get my head around. The funding, the timing, the building up the infrastructure, working with partners in local communities. So you've had to set up a museum and preparation, and you discovered this mad fossil that's unlike anything else before. There's so much going on here. So I guess I had so many questions whilst you were talking. I've now forgotten them all. So the was it with Hashem Salam in Egypt, or was it a different
Yeah,
team? Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So he's quite a
absolutely.
famous. So Egypt has quite a established infrastructure, so that makes sense because he's quite
But
famous. He's done lots of cool stuff.
he has, but Hisham basically has set up vertebrate paleontology in Egypt himself,
Yeah.
and he has.
Yes.
So he did his PhD at Oxford.
Yeah.
He's Egyptian. He went back and set up Egypt's first vertebrate paleontology lab. He's a
Yeah.
huge supporter of, particularly of women. He trains tons of students. He's got a fantastically well-resourced lab
Hmm.
there. They've got a UNESCO geopark, which Ahmed and Kauta also went to see, because we hope this is something that we can set up in the area where we're working
Hmm.
in the future as well. So yeah, really
Yeah.
fantastic work from him.
So I was going to ask about the farmer guy. So he sounds like an absolute dude. I mean, presumably it's difficult to. He's in a financial situation, right, where he has access to this resource, but presumably people are coming onto his land, maybe with or without his permission. I mean, I don't know how you fill out expense claims where you could pay him. I don't know that is that
Yeah,
possible?
yeah.
Or does that get a
So
bit, well, the funding's, I'm curious about the finances and the funding body
yeah,
that got withdrawn and how you arrange these things with local
yeah.
communities. I mean, obviously it's going to be difficult for you to talk about.
No, I mean I'm very happy to. It is difficult. It's really difficult. So initially, the problem with the whole area is subsistence farming, right? These people are
Hmm.
incredibly poor. So when I
Hmm.
described Mohammed's house, I didn't really do it justice. It is a square building with one room, or two rooms
Hmm.
on the side of a hill. Nobody owns the land. It's all because it's subsistence farming. It's like common land. You just,
Hmm.
you farm your strip, and so anyone can move across it. Anyone can come there. Um,
Hmm.
the subsistence farmers, there used to be
Oh, I
four
may have to
seasons.
interject. Sorry about this. You can tell me about this. My daughter has just got home from her first day at big school. I'm gonna have to go and give her a hug, and
Okay. Yeah,
we'll quickly return to the podcast. Sorry about this, Susie.
it's all right. No worries.
She's very excited. Big success.
Oh,
Big
good.
success.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So, subsistence farming. Go. Change of gears.
So the subsistence farmers, they're incredibly poor, and they're basically just, there used to be four seasons in Morocco. So Driss tells me, they used to have a spring, that it snows up there, and then there's a spring, and then they can grow crops, and then there's summer and it gets really hot. But now he says, basically, because of climate change, you just get two seasons. So the snow melts in February, and by sort of late March, April, it's 35 degrees.
Oh
Spring's
Lord.
gone, there's no spring, and they need to find other ways, basically, to support themselves. And so they are increasingly selling fossils that they find,
Hmm.
to these black market fossil smugglers, commercial
Hmm.
dealers. And this is what a lot of them do, and this is how we found the site in the first place, because we found this is exactly the route that,
Hmm.
the first specimen that we got came through. Actually, Morocco's tightened its rules since 2020. So since then, yeah, we wouldn't be taking anything that we found. If you see a
Hmm.
fossil from Morocco in a fossil shop in the UK that came in since 2020, then it
Mm.
has been illegally exported, unless they can produce an export license. So that's always
Mm.
worth asking if you're thinking about buying a fossil. But so the Natural History Museum, for example, no longer acquires fossils from Morocco.
So that's
But
really interesting because I guess there's a spectrum here, right? Of this is one of the things I wanted to ask you about with this Spicomellus story, right? The fossil shops up and down the country and the world are full of Moroccan fossils, right? Like little trinkets, like shark's teeth and mosasaurus teeth are to £1 a penny, 1 pound each, whatever, because there's a lot of them. Ammonites, whatever. So, I mean, presumably that's a source of income, but I guess it depends on where that's going. But on the other end of the scale of the spectrum, we're talking about, rare, scientifically important bits and pieces, including Spicomellus, which I wanted to ask you about that. I understand that part of that was getting, because it's on the black market, it was turning up on Reddit and other fossil sales. So is that part of the story?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is it's an ongoing problem that we have, and I think a thing that's really good about the Moroccan fossil law actually is that the Moroccan authorities recognise that lots of people, particularly down in the Kem, for example, actually make a huge amount of their money. And it's actually, I think, back in 2001 or something, it was estimated that the fossil trade actually contributed around $50 million a year to the Moroccan economy. So it's a hugely important part of the economy in Morocco. Things like, as you say, shark's teeth, mosasaur teeth. And the fossil laws in Morocco, they recognize that this is important, and actually that there's yeah, that there are fossils that are more scientifically significant than others, and those that aren't so scientifically significant, yeah, they inspire people, and people can own them, and that's a nice thing to have, and that's fine, right? And so as somebody who works down in the Kem collecting shark's teeth, you can get a permit to do that, and then you can export them. You can sell them
Okay.
to a dealer who has an export license, and that's all totally legit.
Okay, so it's all right.
That
So, I mean, do I need to phone the police? Because I have a Moroccan I visited Morocco a couple of times as a tourist. I have a couple of Moroccan trilobites on my desk. Do I need to phone the police and get arrested?
I think you're probably okay, especially if you did it prior to 2020.
Well, this is
But
definitely prior to 20. Oh,
yeah, well, you're
yeah, prior
fine
to
then if you did it
2020. Yes,
prior
yeah,
to
yeah.
2020. It's fine, and they also do have. I understand there's some sort of thing about if you picking up something off the surface as a tourist, that that's generally
Mm,
thought to be fine. What is more problematic is the sort of stuff that we have at our site where and it's really difficult because the more we publicize the work that we're doing,
yeah.
the more stuff the higher the value of the fossil. So we're actually seeing parts of Spicomellus appearing on websites in across Europe for up
Mm.
to €30,000 for a
Holy
single
shit.
spike or plate. And this is really problematic. I mean, somebody texted me just yesterday to tell me that somebody in Whitby is advertising on Facebook Marketplace that he's about to put fossils from the stegosaur from our site on sale. Now, there is
Oh.
one specimen of the stegosaur. There is a single specimen. It is the holotype. We don't. This is really seriously scientific significant material,
Mm, mm,
and we don't. This person absolutely does not have the right permits because there's only one group who has excavation
mm,
permits to work where we're working, and that's us.
mm,
So
mm,
I know that whoever has, I haven't sold this fossil to him, so he definitely has that fossil illegally. So
mm,
it's hugely frustrating. And actually, Anjali Goswami, another friend of the Fossil Files, and I went back in May 2024, and in that field work, we were particularly interested in trying to look at the small things that are running around at the feet of the dinosaurs. We were looking for
mm.
microvertebrates, and we got to the site, and it had been completely devastated.
Oh
So there are
man.
huge holes. The fossil layer. It outcrops over maybe, I don't know, a couple of kilometers squared, and it's
Hmm.
this green layer surrounded by kind of pinkish red rocks, and the whole thing. It was like somebody had just got a massive digger in
Mm.
there and just dug these huge holes out, and it's all illegal.
That's sad. But I guess Morocco, it sounds like the Morocco government are doing everything they can to protect the geological heritage, the science, and the farmers, I guess. I mean,
I mean,
it's
it's just really tricky to enforce, isn't it? And
yeah.
so we think that the best way that, really we can protect the area is through engaging the local community,
Hmm.
and making them value the geological resources as they are in the ground rather than when they
Hmm.
come out of the ground, right?
Hmm.
So, of course, if we can generate some sustainable geotourism to the site, so getting people out, it has collateral benefits because people we see improvements in infrastructure. If tourists are coming out, they want something to eat, they want something to drink. There's no hotels in
Hmm.
Filming. There's no at the moment. There's no restaurants. There's a few cafes. It's not a big place with lots of infrastructure.
Hmm.
So there's the potential for kind of tour guiding to occur, all these sorts of things. If you can start sustainable geotourism, which is already a big deal in Morocco, if
Hmm.
we could incorporate this, then the local people start to see the benefits of having the fossils where they are, rather than dig them up and flog them. It
Excellent.
really would help us. So that's our next. That's where we're going and what we're looking for funding for now.
Okay. So, I mean, that's absolutely fascinating story, and well done for doing all this work to get these things. That it's going to be work that pays off for the future. But there was two things I wanted to ask you about. One small thing, and I guess one thing that we haven't actually talked about is the science of what actually this. We should let's save some time for that. But before that, the funding. So you mentioned the funding was withdrawn, and but getting, as we talked about before on fossil files, getting field work funding is tricky, right? But in this occasion, it's a bit different. You actually know it's there, right? It's just a case of we've got guaranteed returns. Can we go and dig it up?
Yeah, I mean, I had a grant rejected. I had a level 2 grant rejected by National Geographic. I had a Leverhulme standard
Ouch.
grant rejected on these things. Actually, I think I've had two Leverhulme standard grants rejected. Not even made it through the outland stage. We were very lucky to have get some funding from an organisation called the British Institute of Libyan and Northern African Studies, who gave us a small grant that has allowed us to do the field work. And actually will allow us to go back next year. The Natural History Museum, our science investment fund, has provided a little bit of funding for us to go. Angeli and I went on that. Richard and I were able to set up the lab at USMBA thanks to some development money from the University of Birmingham. So Birmingham has also given us a little bit of money to support
Nice.
that. And also we had a generous private donation, which really just by somebody who was very inspired by what we were trying to do. And that allowed us to train Kauta and Ahmed. But it feels like we're scratching around, it feels like it's really, the whole thing that we've done, all this work that we've done hinges on, just really small amounts of money. Actually, some of the first excavation that we did, I funded out my own pocket, um,
Wow.
because we just didn't have any money to do it.
Yeah.
So, it 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 it, it basically we don't need very much money. It's very cheap
Hmm.
to do field work there, but it does everything just hinges around really, really, like if we got a proper grant, if we got a Leverhulme grant, it would keep us going. We would be able to do so much. And we just, having a postdoc working on this project, this is the other thing. I was the first author on the Nature paper because
Hmm.
there's no one else. Like we don't have any
Yeah.
staff working on this, so it's really, it's yeah, it's hard to do these things without funding.
Well, I guess I was just thinking about not so much just doing the field work itself, but you're doing things right by setting up the infrastructure, training up people locally, the transfer of the skills and infrastructure. That costs money, and to do things properly is it's not normally how grants are set up. But anyway, let's move on. I was about to, if you want to send Susie Maidment money, send them to contact the sponsors to
Buy me a
continue the field
coffee.
work. Right there you go. Yeah. Um, no, that wasn't what I was going to ask. Let's talk about actually Spicomellus. So let's actually talk about the dinosaur because I suspect there'll be some fossil fans that will probably be frustrated that we haven't actually talked about how fucking cool and weird this thing. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't swear in this fossil. About how awesome this thing is. So, I mean, it's difficult because if I'm asking you the wrong person, you could go on for hours about this. Give us a summary about how weird and mad Spicomellus is.
So Spicomellus is an ankylosaur. It's the oldest ankylosaur in the fossil record, and it's the only one that is known from Africa. It's Middle Jurassic, it's 165 million years old. So ankylosaurs are really well known from the Cretaceous period, particularly from the late Cretaceous, and when they really start to get going. They're best known from North America and Asia. And the thing with Spicomellus is because we have very little information about that the very early stages of ankylosaur evolution, although we know they must have been there in the Middle Jurassic. So having this very early ankylosaur, you might think, okay, this is great because it's going to help us to understand kind of the early stages in the construction of ankylosaur's very unusual body plan. They have this very wide body, short limbs, and of course completely covered in armor. And the crazy thing about Spicomellus, so I might have predicted that its armor might be, it might consist of a few plates, maybe not all covered,
Hmm. Hmm.
maybe kind of flattish plates with maybe little kind of peaks in the middle or something, quite simple, like
Hmm.
not like
Hmm.
super elaborate. But it turns out that that's not what the earliest ankylosaur looks like at all, is absolutely covered from apparently from head to foot with these incredibly long spikes. And we actually don't see spikes in ankylosaurs very much. Generally, the armor, it does tend to be more flattish. We have some plates. But we don't tend to have loads of spiky things. And in Spicomellus, a really crazy thing that it has is in several ankylosaurs, we know they have kind of these neck rings. They're called cervical half rings. They're like collars that go around the neck. And
Hmm.
normally they're just made up of kind of flat plates or little pyramid-like plates. In Spicomellus, we've got a huge neck ring and it has four spikes sticking out from the sides. Now, we've only got one complete one, but they all look to have been the same size. And the one complete one is 87 centimeters long. So it's got a meter long spike sticking out from its neck. So it would have had four of these meter long
But
spikes.
that's not coming from the ribs, right? That we won't be on. It's not.
No, no,
No,
that's
no.
just that's a natural osteoderm. So
So it's
that's
an
a bony
osteoderm
plate.
because
That's
this is the
yeah,
thing that I find so weird about Spicomellus is that. Sorry, I'm interjecting you in the middle of saying this, but this is why I find this taxon so weird, right? So, as fossil file fans might be aware, Susie's the dinosaur person. I'm not dinosaur person. All the stuff about it being earliest ankylosaur for someone like me leaves me a bit cold-hearted. But the fact that it's got things sticking out of his ribs, they're like
yeah.
these armored ones. I expected to have osteoderm plates on top of it, right? But this thing is weird. This is an N of one and from the vertebrate fossil record, as far as I'm aware.
It absolutely is, and I mean, but we knew that about it before. It was just
Yeah,
that
that's true. That's from your
people were
first paper.
dubious about our identification.
Yeah,
Somebody
but
even said, could this be some sort of weird fish jaw? But no, we were right.
no.
They were ankylosaur
Yeah.
ribs. So yeah, we knew that already, but I think what
Yeah.
we didn't know on top of that, I mean, we didn't know that it was covered. Every single dorsal rib had those, which we now know,
Yeah.
and there were six of them on each dorsal rib. But we also know that it had some sort of tail weapon. So they had these
Oh
vertebrae in the
yeah.
end of the tail that are fused together. And this is something that you really only see much later in ankylosaur evolution, or we thought we only saw much later in ankylosaur evolution, with the ankylosaurs that have a tail club. And we haven't found a tail club. We're not sure it has a tail club, but it has some sort of weapon. We think it might have a spiky weapon because the rest of it's covered in spikes. And also, actually, honestly, we just couldn't find. There's not enough places in the body to fit all these spikes. So, so we're like, oh yeah, maybe well they must be on the tail because they're not on the back because that's the rib spikes. They're not around the
Yeah.
neck because these massive collars. So we've
Yeah.
got all these other like compound structures. We've got spikes with massive spikes and then small spikes stuck next to them. We've got like plates. We've got just crazy stuff. It was fun. We did the reconstruction of this. I asked my former student Matt Dempsey to do a reconstruction. I basically just uploaded him a photo of like loads of weird armor and went, just go nuts. Just like, let your imagination run wild because we know where some of
Yes.
these things are, but most of them we don't. So I think it
Yeah.
was a fun project for him.
No, I mean, he was an undergraduate at Manchester, so I
Of
remember
course he
teaching him.
was,
He was
Matt. Yeah.
massively into his dinosaurs. We had running jokes about how I used to teach him dinosaurs, and he would put his hand up in the lecture and say, "Well, actually," I was like, "Okay,
No.
I'm teaching a student that knows more about dinosaurs than I do." I had the gall to call one particular dinosaur boring, and he had to stop the
Oh my
lecture and
God.
say, "No, no, no, it's not boring. That's not a boring dinosaur." So that was it. I described Psittacosaurus as a boring dinosaur, and he was like, "No, it isn't." And then, yeah, okay. But the reason I should explain that Psittacosaurus was interesting because it had this amazing soft tissue preservation. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So Spicomellus is amazing. Thank you for the extra fossil files bonus episode, Susie. Obviously, this is a bit different from normal because I'm not trying to poke holes in the science or
Well,
really on
feel
this
free
because
to. I mean, I can,
no,
I
no,
can, I can.
I wouldn't dare. But what you can ask, now that I have the opportunity to actually ask the lead author of this, this sounds like there's lots of other things yet to come from this site in Morocco.
Yeah, so I mean, actually, we have already described. We described the one of the oldest one of the oldest stegosaurs. We've
Yeah.
also described earlier this year. We found again fragments. The top of a femur of a little bird hip dinosaur, which we identify
Mhm.
as actually the world's oldest cheropodon. So these are the kind of small two-legged dinosaurs like Hypsilophodon that went on to evolve into things like the
Mhm.
iguanodontians and the ceratopsians.
Mhm.
We didn't name that. You'll be pleased to hear because it was rather fragmentary. But there's a small two-legged herbivore in the fauna that we haven't found a full skeleton of yet, but we know it's there. We published it already, and it again, very, very, very old for this group of dinosaurs. We also found some teeth of a group of sauropods called pteriosaurs, which we just published actually a month or so ago. So they are the oldest pteriosaurs in Africa. So there's a lot of stuff from this site that's coming out. We've got some big theropod teeth.
What's a pteriosaur?
It's a type of sauropod. So they're long neck, long tailed
Oh,
dinosaurs.
right.
They have very characteristic teeth, so we can identify them by their teeth. Actually, do you know what? In the lab, in Juris's lab, I'm hoping that Kauta and Ahmed are going to get around to preparing it at some point, when we can get them some more funding to do some work, because they finished their PhDs now, so we need to find them jobs basically. There are some things that are wrapped up that the farmer pulled out of the drainage ditch, and he wrapped them up, and I've cut open half the packages to have a look. He sort of wrapped them up in paper and sellotape, and I've cut open half packages, and I don't know what bones they are. I can't identify the bones.
Wow.
So there's something weird in there that we need to prep. I don't know what it is. There's more cool stuff. There's more cool stuff
That's
to come.
exciting.
There's some big theropod teeth. We've got bits of croc, and Angeli and I haven't even picked the microverts yet. So maybe we'll find some tiny mammals there too.
So watch this space. We're looking forward to lots of stuff, and also in collaboration with this team in Morocco. So now that this new infrastructure exists, hopefully they'll be able to undertake a lot more of this work themselves, I guess.
Yeah,
Great.
I mean, that's our aim really, is basically to get Kauta and Ahmed to the point where they can take this on as their project, and have it as they lead it, and we're just there in the background to say, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Susie. I don't have much more to say to that, other than I'm glad that I was able to convince you to do that, because that is a fascinating story. And even though you were reluctant to do what you were seeing as self-promotion, but I think it's just interesting. So
I'm never reluctant to do self-promotion, Rob. It was more just I haven't stopped talking about it for 2 weeks.
Well, you haven't spoken to me about it, so I think that from my own selfish perspective, I thank you for that time. Okay, thanks, Susie. The Fossil Files was presented by Robert Sansom and Susannah Maidment. You can find more information, including links to the original papers that were discussed, at fossils.libsyn.com, and you can contact us at fossilfiles.pod@gmail.com.